already done so. At the conclusion of our program, don't forget if you got a red ticket to come up and take a book so they don't have to take them home again. And I know they would appreciate that. I'll turn the program over to John.
That's good. Lots of room.
Get the special chair.
Thank you.
I think you can get up into this chair.
Okay, sure. No problem.
All right. You got your mic all good?
I think so.
You look great.
Thank you. Thank you. Feels good to sit in this big, beautiful chair here, too.
Nice.
Hey, he's going to need a mic.
He's mic'd up.
No.
Nope.
That's
Oh.
only to the camera.
Oh,
That's only
here
to
we
the
go.
camera.
There you go. How about that? And you're going to want to hold it close to your mouth.
All right.
Okay?
Hold it close.
Yeah.
Well, I must say this is an impressive crowd here. It really is. Wow.
It's wonderful when all the technology works. You may know how to get rid of that bar.
Hide your mouse.
Hide my mouth.
Your cursor, put it
Mouse.
on the side.
Your bug.
All right.
Hi. Hey, everybody. It's a delight to be back here with my friends from the Indianapolis World War II Roundtable. I bring you greetings from Stuart Goldman, who spoke here about the Battle of Nomonhan in July. I was down in Florida just a week ago to show him all the photos that I took when I went to Mongolia in August. And while I was in Florida, I drove over from the Gulf Coast where he lived to the Atlantic side to Fort Pierce, where Arnie trained initially as a underwater demolition team swimmer. I also send you greetings from Bob Reynolds, who spoke here a few years ago. Blythe and I went down to visit him in Texas, where he's living in a nursing home. He is 98 years old and is doing very well for someone 98. By the way, Arnie turned 97 just last Wednesday. I've often said that through my study of the war, which got started 20 years ago when I interviewed Annie's father, my uncle, and which culminated in the book, The Last Lieutenant, it's just gotten, well, depending on who you ask, it's gotten worse or better, but I just can't get enough of this. And one of the big spin-offs from this study of the war is I have met some of the finest people I will ever know because of this study. I count Arnie now as among one of those. There's a bit of a history between us. Arnie's son, Eric, was a classmate of mine at West Lafayette High School. Arnie is a painter. He taught painting at Purdue University. My late father was also a painter, and they would get together up in Arnie's studio and talk painting. So I know a little bit about Arnie from way back. But anyway, what I want to do today, the format's going to be that I'm going to give a brief, well, nothing I do is brief anymore, slideshow about what Arnie did in the war as what became known as frogman. He was a demolitioneer. He used to be called demolitioneers, right?
Oh, the most underwater demolitioner, yeah.
Okay. Mainly going to talk about the Battle of Iwo Jima, but he also saw some combat at Luzon and Leyte Gulf in January 1945. So there's going to be a little bit of background, and then I'm going to pointedly ask Arnie some questions to elaborate on some of the stories that he remembers during his experience in the war out in the Pacific. back in World War II, we needed underwater demolition team members to swim into invasion beaches before an invasion to make sure to do hydro water studies to see if there's any underwater obstacles, mines, what the sand was like, what the surf was like, how deep was it, could this beach accommodate a landing craft? That was one of the first jobs that the underwater demolition team members did. And they were known as frogmen. And later in life they became known as SEALs. So Arnie was a World War II equivalent of a Navy SEAL. And he did his initial training at Fort Pierce, Florida. This is where I went to visit just a week ago. Arnie, tell us how you ended up in the Navy and from there being volunteered as a underwater demolition team member.
Well, my brother and I, when we heard there was going to be a war, we didn't want to be in the ground anymore. We come from Montana, and we'd had enough of this dry land farming. So we wanted to go to sea. So we both went down to Fargo. We were going to school in Moorhead, Minnesota, just on the Minnesota side. We went down and enlisted in the Navy. And then went back to school for a little while. And that's how I got in the Navy. We enlisted.
How did you end up as a swimmer with the underwater demolition?
Well, that's a little longer story.
You got a short version?
A short version, after graduating from midshipman school in Chicago, some recruiters came up from Florida, from Fort Pierce, telling us about the exciting work of being a frogman. It wasn't called that then, but Tony Malfio was a football player on an opposite team from mine, and he was always better. His team won. But when we got to midshipman school, we were both the best of friends. And we talked to each other into joining this wonderful outfit that goes to Florida and goes out and discovers what needs to be blown up and stuff like that. So we talked to each other into volunteering for underwater demolition teams. It wasn't really known yet by that name, but that's how I got in there, because of Tony Malfio.
Hold the mic closer.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
He was a swimmer, and that was the main thing they trained to do in Florida, but he didn't really get to become a really proficient swimmer until he got to Maui, where he trained even further. Now, I'm sorry?
Go ahead. They said, "Can you swim?" I said, "Yes." I swam across Fox Creek several times and back without stopping. And then they said, "Okay, jump in here and swim the mile, as they call it, the ocean mile. It's a little longer than our mile." So I did. And I got out to the first buoy. Here comes a guy back from the third buoy, swimming away. And then a praying mantle wrapped himself around me. I was in real trouble. So I waved my hand, and the ship came and picked me up and took me back to shore, along with a lot of other guys.
This is the museum to the underwater demolition team and the Navy SEALs down in Fort Pierce, Florida, where Arnie trained initially. And this guy in the middle is called the Naked Warrior. And he was called the Naked Warrior because all he wore going into combat was a swimming suit, a mask, some flippers, and his only weapon was a knife. And Arnie, he brought his flippers today.
And the face mask.
And his face mask.
It was old rubber that wasn't quite nice, you know. We had to carve it to fit our face. So it's individually carved.
All right, that's the Naked Warrior. Now, they were known as frogman. That was not an official term, but it stuck. Ernie Pyle, whom everybody here probably knows, had a different sobriquet for them. He thought they were half fish and half nuts. Good old Ernie.
You know what happened to him?
This is just another example of the, I took these pictures at the museum a week and a half ago, just some more flippers. This rubber wrap has, I think, explosives. They used satchel charges that weighed about 50 pounds full of dynamite, and they would use these to blow up anything they might find, like an underwater obstacle.
Plane coming straight at us. I was up there where I could get a good look at things. And he was aimed right at us, and I knew if we hit that fantail with 40 tons of TNT, we'd all go to Davy, what's his name? Davy Jones's locker. But at the last minute, he turned, he saw a bigger ship, and he turned hard left and crashed into the Indianapolis, or the Louisville. It was a big cruiser, and just splashed off somewhat.
Here's the Louisville getting one of 3 kamikaze hits in just a few days.
Yeah.
Here's Lingayen Gulf. By the way, this is where the Japanese landed in 1942 and made their way down to Bataan. Now, this is an LCI, Landing Craft Infantry. It's a small boat, or this was a gunboat, and these boats would provide covering fire for the swimmers. They would be very, very close to the invasion beach, probably closer than any other ship, because they were quite small. All they had was 40 millimeter and 50 caliber machine guns, and they would provide covering fire for the swimmers while they're doing their thing up on the beach or in the water just off of the beach. So this is an LCI. This one, 449, was hit very badly at Iwo Jima, and the commanding officer of this ship got the Medal of Honor for what he did.
They had 12 of those, and they were up there 6 at a time. They all got knocked out. First 6, and then the next 6.
But that was at Iwo Jima.
Yeah, at Iwo Jima.
We're still at Lingayen Gulf.
Oh.
So here we are at Lingayen Gulf. The way this worked is the Blessman, the ship that brought Arnie and his boats, would get within 2,000 yards of the beach. And in this particular battle, or this invasion, boats 1 and 2, which carried platoons 1 and 2, took 10 swimmers in to within 500 yards, and that's where they were dropped off, at 500 yards. The LCIs stood off 750 yards from the beach. They flanked the invasion beaches. The beaches that team number 15 was responsible for was this one here, Green Beach and Yellow Beach. So there were actually 4 LCIs, 1 on each side of each beach, providing covering fire for the swimmers. And they were in the water for just about an hour. How was the water at Lingayen Gulf?
Not too bad, just kind of cool, but a little warmer than Iwo Jima.
Then Those are the swimmers swimming in. In case you missed it, here they go. Here they're swimming in.
Yeah.
So they did their thing, and then these boats would come back and would never stop. They just would drive by, or not drive by, motor by and pick the swimmers up, take them back. Here's the ramp that's down from this LCP. Now, from once this, they didn't. What did you find at Lingayen Gulf?
Say it again.
What did the swimmers find at Lingayen Gulf? Was
Nothing.
Nothing.
They weren't expecting us. It was
The Japanese did not expect
surprise.
an invasion at Lingayen Gulf. They were all up in the mountains, and so there wasn't anything there. Now, Arnie was not in one of those first two boats. He was in boat number 3, but didn't get in the water. What did you do while you were in boat number 3, Arnie?
Well,
Tell us the truth now.
one of my crew said I was looking at that 50 caliber gun and they said, well, why don't you just take out and shoot it? It's fun. So I did. But the trouble is, we were pointing toward our ship out there. And the people on the ship saw this firing coming. They're about to fire back. We quit and, with the foolishness, and got back safely.
Well, anyway, after this experience at Lingayen Gulf, they went back to Ulithi to start training for the invasion of Iwo Jima. Now, Ulithi is a giant atoll in the Western Carolines. It's so big, it's got this big lagoon ringed by little bitty islands, and it's so big that the entire Fifth Fleet could fit inside.
Right.
And these are Essex-class carriers all lined up, known as Murderers Row. And they got assorted cruisers and battleships and auxiliary ships, but the whole fleet, over 500 ships, could fit in this lagoon. This was also a very popular place for R&R. This is Arnie's platoon of enlisted men on Mogmog Island, which is the name of the little bitty island. And Arnie's not in this picture because this is for enlisted, this part of the island is for enlisted men only.
Except the guy in the middle, he's the captain. He was my superior.
And who was that?
Andy Andrews.
And, who's from Indiana? This guy Anderson was from Indiana.
He graduated from your college here in Indianapolis.
Huh. Anyway, this is where the enlisted men had R&R. Arnie being an officer got to go to the officers club, and this is the officers club at Mogmog Island at Ulithi. Now, Iwo Jima. This is the same gunnery map that I've got on the photo. You can come up and take a peek at that sometime. Where is Iwo Jima relative to the United States? Now, these maps are not to scale, but that's not important. I just want to give you an idea of where Iwo Jima is relative to the United States. Here we have the equator. Iwo Jima and Miami, Florida are virtually on the same latitude. They're within 60 nautical miles of each other, north and south. So that's about where Iwo Jima is. Same latitude as Miami, Florida. This is the extent of the Japanese defensive perimeter immediately after the Battle of Midway and before the Battle of Guadalcanal. At the Battle of Midway, we stopped the expansion of the Japanese perimeter. At the Battle of Guadalcanal, we began pushing them back. And in October 1944, we had pushed them out of the Central Pacific. We'd pushed them out of the Solomon Islands. We'd pushed them out of New Guinea. And MacArthur was poised to invade at Leyte Gulf. And here's Iwo Jima in the circle. Once we got to the Marianas, which is right down here, right here is the Marianas, where we had big air base, the busiest air base in the world at the time on the island of Tinian. We started the very long-range bomber plan of bombing Japan with the B-29. Now the B-29 had an engine that wasn't very good. They would catch on fire and sputter, and it wasn't a good engine. And sometimes these planes would get shot up by flak over Japan and would have trouble making it all the way back to Tinian, 1,500 miles from Japan. They barely had this is the route that they took from the Marianas up to Japan, right over Iwo Jima. The other thing that Iwo Jima had was a radio that they could radio Japan, says there's an incoming raid expected in 2 hours. That's why Iwo Jima had to be taken. The other reason, the main reason though, is, well, first of all, here's the operational limit of a B-29. It just had enough gas to get up to the islands, drop their bombs, and get back. But again, they'd get shot up, have engine trouble, and they needed a mid-course haven to land. That was Iwo Jima. This is what we were trying to avoid by taking the island of Iwo Jima and putting an airstrip on it. Over 1,500 B-29s successfully landed on Iwo Jima that had we not had Iwo Jima would have been forced to ditch. That represents over 15,000 crew. So that's why we took Iwo Jima. And here's a B-29 on Iwo Jima. The invasion of Iwo Jima was codenamed Operation Detachment. Here are the first waves going into the invasion beaches. There were 2 landing beaches, potential landing beaches. On the east side of the island was the preferred landing beaches. This is where they wanted to land. But we had an alternate landing beach on the west side of the island. And one of the jobs that Arnie and his team, I think there were 4 teams of underwater demolition swimmers,
Right.
was to determine what the beaches were like. How deep was the water? And were there any underwater obstacles? And what did you find, Arnie, when you got there? By
Well-
the way, just a sec, Arnie.
Yeah, go
This is where Arnie reconnoitered
Blue Beach.
Blue Beach.
And there were 2 big hulls on Blue Beach. The Blue Beach had sort of A and B, but the furthest out, there were 2 big hulls, and they thought that they would probably be nests for machine gunners. So when we went in, that's the rest of the
Skull or a coral head or something that might impede the landing at an invasion beach. He did a lot of training at Maui. He became a much better swimmer at Maui. They practiced demolition, blowing up things, practiced reconnaissance. And what's going on here is this swimmer, one of the naked warriors, is approaching, this is training now, some kind of underwater obstacle with this satchel charge that he's going to use to blow this thing up.
steel.
Yeah. Now, I saw this down in Florida at this museum. Out of the corner of my eye, it looked like a noose for hanging somebody. But this was what they used to drag swimmers out of the water. Did you ever?
Sure.
Why don't
Yeah.
you tell us how this worked?
Well, the guy in the safe boat, he holds it out like this, and the boat doesn't want to stop because then they're a target for shooting. And so when you come up to him, he swings you into the rowboat. Grab a hold of those things. We get the big end, he gets the small end, and swim it. Don't have to stop for guys to get it back in your boat.
I got a little video. There was a little video next to this that I snuck a small sample of. Oh, first of all, not all the photos were real glamorous. This is Arnie, by the way.
Could be.
No, I don't know who that is.
It isn't hairy enough.
No. Oh. There's Arnie's. He had a nickname.
I was so hairy they called me the bear. And then they couldn't pronounce Kvaalen, so that could be Laval. And then pretty quick was Laval the bear. And they didn't know my other name. I was called either Laval, Pierre Laval, or the bear.
Now, this is how Arnie got, or all the swimmers would get from, they went to battle in a high-speed transport, which in Arnie's case was a converted destroyer escort called the USS Blessman, which I'll show you pictures of in a minute. But they would get to the beach. They would be taken in to within 500 yards of a beach they were going to reconnoiter in this boat. This is a landing craft personnel.
Yeah.
And there were several versions. This is the R version, and the R version was there because it had a forward ramp. There was other versions called the L version, which was just a long, I think L stood for large or long. Anyway, it did not have a ramp, they just had to jump over the sides. But you see the boat, the little dinghy off to the side? This is what and I've got a video that shows how this works. The swimmers, when they got near, the boats didn't stop, as Arnie says, then they're a target. So they're always on the go. The swimmers would roll into this little boat and then immediately roll into the water. And I've got a video of that. There's a little diorama at the museum that shows this happening. here's this noose. And here's some swimmers that they're going by and they're gonna grab them and pull. I don't know how they didn't dislocate their shoulders. Okay, here's the video. It's not very long. Here's another video showing them falling into the water, not falling, but sliding into the water and then being pulled out of the water without the noose, but just grabbing their arms. And again, I don't know how they don't get dislocated shoulders.
With the job done, the men are picked up as swiftly as they were dropped. On board, the men get Brent, another group of unsung heroes of the war.
I don't know if you could understand what was said at the very end, but after each of these reconnaissance missions, once they got back aboard, they were given a couple ounces of brandy. Right, Arnie?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I swore it off, so I gave mine to somebody else.
Here's Ensign Arne Kvaalen. Not sure where this
Second,
picture was-
1-2.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure where this picture was taken. Here's a better picture of him. He's in the front row in the middle, and this is his rubber boat crew. Our platoon, 3rd platoon of the Underwater Demolition Team 15.
Those 2 men on the side got killed. They end up there.
Now, they weren't supposed to have mascots, but Underwater Demolition Team 15 had a mascot. Why don't you tell us about your mascot?
Esther, named Esther, and the enlisted men sneaked her aboard the ship, and she was the pet of everybody. But they're not supposed to have such wild animals on board a ship. Yeah, it's Esther.
Now, this was a ship that took Arnie from San Francisco to Maui, and I asked him to pronounce this for me on our way down here tonight. I can't remember how. What's this ship, Arnie?
No, this was not. The ship took us from San Francisco to Maui the first time I ever went to the ocean. Was the Tichidana.
That's what this is. Yeah, that's what
No,
this
it
is.
was a Dutch.
This is the Dutch
Is it?
ship. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep, that's the Dutch ship. Tell us about the crew.
Well, the crew had a topside crew, which were Hindu, and the bottom, the engine crew, they were Muslim. Yeah. They didn't have anything to do with each other.
This is the transport, the high-speed transport, a converted escort carrier. What did I say, carrier? I'm sorry, destroyer escort. It took Arnie from Hawaii to the Western Pacific. And this was configured for a very specific purpose. Here's another view of it.
Yeah.
Now, see these boats here? These are the LCPs that took Arnie and his fellow swimmers to the beaches, and there were 4 of them per ship.
2 on each side.
2 on each side. Here's another one.
That's the same ship, 48, number 48.
Yeah, that's the Blessman. Here's a model on this. I think a full-scale model. This might be in New Orleans, but this is an LCPP, the long version or the large version. It doesn't have the ramp in front. Now, this is how Arnie got to the Pacific. He took a train to San Francisco, took that Dutch ship to Oahu, and the Blessman to Ulithi. The first operation that Arnie took part in was to reconnoiter the landing beaches in Lingayen Gulf for the invasion of Luzon in January of 1945. Here's Leyte, just to give you some idea of where things are. And this is the route that the Blessman took to get from Ulithi to the invasion beaches. Here's the Blessman. Now, Arnie got away with some things that he might not get away with ordinarily. And he was up in the crow's nest while they were in Lingayen Gulf 3 days before the invasion, which was scheduled for January 9th, 1945. So in D-3, January 6th, Arnie was up in the crow's nest with a pair of binoculars. And tell us what you saw.
Well, I saw planes not dropping bombs, but crashing themselves into ships. We couldn't figure that out. That never happened before. They'd plow into a ship. Well, we had 40 tons of TNT in the fantail of that ship right back there. And I saw this.
It got started in Lafayette, and a friend of mine organized a birthday party for Arnie last Wednesday. So we had a birthday party for Arnie at Arnie's. Spelled just a little different.
Yeah,
18 people showed up.
That was wonderful.
A lot of the information I got came from this book, including that photo of Arnie back at Fort Pierce, in which he's quoted quite a bit. But he would take issue with the title.
That's right. It was cold. We got used to it. I don't know what we do. The next trip was to Japan. We were on our way when they decided to drop a couple bombs instead. And so we didn't have to go to Japan. But that would have been really cold water. And a guy that I knew well, it was one of our retreats afterwards, and he'd seen the operation plan, and he said that they decided they could see that the underwater demolition guys would probably lose about 75% of their men.
Well, I was hoping that Anchors Away would be played here. Audio visual let me down, but anyway, that's Arnie's story, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've learned so much about a part of the war that I knew nothing about from studying about this battle or about what the underwater demolition teams did and what Arnie did specifically. It's been a real honor to get to know him, and like I said, I have met some of the finest people I'll ever know as a result of the study of this war, and Arnie is way up in that list. So we'll stick around and answer questions if you have any, but otherwise thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Well, we want to thank you. On behalf of the World War II Roundtable, our board members, and all of our members and guests, we would like to present you with our special commemorative challenge.
Oh, wow. How
sir.
about that?
And we want to thank you for all your war efforts.
Thank you.
You're the greatest generation, and you saved us.
That's what they say.
Yes.
Now I'll have two of these things. I can.
Wonderful.
Would you please put the chairs back under the tables?
Thank
It
you. I
makes it
gotta
easier to
take care of my nose.
please put the chairs under tables.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Arnie, may I give you a hug and a kiss?
Just let me.
You are wonderful. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yes. Well, you know it now. But
Well, let me find
amazing
my.
story.
I got a handkerchief here. I hope someplace.
Oh, I've got a napkin.
Here we go. Yeah. That'll do. I got an old man's runny nose.
Well, your nose runs and your feet smell. You build upside down.
Where's Charlie? Outside. All we need is he having a smoke or something? Is that the microphone? Okay, good, because this is special effects here. All right, tell us about after you're done at Iwo Jima. Where did the Blessman go, and what happened?
Well, the skipper of the Blessman and the skipper of all the Demolition were buddies, and they all liked to be in on the excitement. So they went out on the coral reef on the far side from where we did our morning's work, and they were up there running around on a coral beach. I mean, the coral underneath the water, it's probably waist deep. And they got back late to their ship. So we had to go flank speed in order to get onto our station for the evening. And that's what left the silver trail. We were going flank speed through that water in the dark. And this Japanese Betty, twin engine Betty, saw us, followed it up and dropped two bombs on us. One hit the water and one hit us, blew us all to pieces. Yeah.
There was supposed to be a big bang.
There was, we had about half casualties, either dead or wounded from that.
Bang. The second bomb glanced off the side of the ship and hit the water and did not detonate.
Right.
Ah, did you hear it?
Yeah.
All right, Arnie, talk about what happened on the ship after this bomb hit.
Well, for one thing, I was scared to death because I wasn't ready to die. He didn't come for that, but we climbed out. It's about 9 o'clock in the evening, and by the time we were all trying to go to bed, we were up here underneath that, about that point, to turn it back there. Our quarters were in the, underneath the 5-inch gun mount there, and that's where one bomb hit and bounced into the water. The other one hit the midships way back here, and it really did a trip on us. So we said, big old McCallum, he said, we've been hit. And I said, wow. So we all got out of our quarters, which is just the other side, that 5-inch gun mount there, and climbed up through the foxhole, or what they call them. Not aboard ship, they don't call it a foxhole.
Hatch.
Huh?
Hatch.
Yeah. Anyhow, I blowed my belt. This it was empty, but it could. You pull a carbon dioxide, and blow it up by itself, and I pulled that so big that I couldn't get up through we had to climb a ladder and through a top hole there, what do you call it? Anyhow, I got out finally, and man, it was all silent, big fire burning, and I was not prepared for this. So what we did, we tried to do it best we could. We got a fire brigade, tried to put that kind of a fire out with buckets. Of course, it didn't work at all, but it gave us something to do. And
the Gilmore
yeah,
came along. This is a World War II 4 stacker converted. Came alongside and helped I mean, it didn't want to come alongside because they knew that they had 40 tons of TNT near this fire, and nobody wanted to get near this, but the skipper came up, and they had water hose that worked, and they put out the fire, right?
Well, yes, they did. That's what happened. But the guy that was the captain of all of the UDT guys, he was a crazy guy. He got in, he said, I'll go in and see if it's safe to get your whole ship close enough to put the hoses on. So he didn't want to, this ship was burning away up there, and we had about 20 inches of freeboard left and ready to tip over and go down. Well, he came along and was brave enough, we got to hand it to him. He found out that he could call his ship in, the Gilbert. It was a command ship for all of our teams, and he called it in, put the hoses on the fire, got it under control.
And tell us about how you got from the Blessman to the Gilmer and what you did once you got aboard.
I was very magnanimous. I was going to go aboard and help the dead and the wounded, I said to my skipper. He said, okay, Bear, you do that. So I went aboard where they were putting the dead and the wounded and identified them. And another guy was with me. We looked for a place then to sleep. Well, we didn't find any place except the iron deck underneath the officers' club mess hall. So we went in there and got to sleep somehow, at least I did. And the knock on the door, and it said, Ensign Kvaalen, you're required to come down to that Captain Kaufman's headquarters in the base of the ship. So I had to get up and go down, and the Kaufman said, Ensign Kvaalen, you report at 0600 on the deck and lead the first wave into Blue Beach. I thought, what? So that's what I did. I went up there and got on the first wave and led them into Blue Beach because I presumably knew where it was. I'd swum in the day before.
What did you do on the Gilmer with the Dutch doctor?
Well, I helped him. Actually, he was from Holland, and he was a little older than I by quite a bit, but working real hard. They'd bring these wounded guys in and put them on the operating table, and he'd look them over, and I said, can I help you? He said, yes, I'll give you this what do they call it, syringe. And he says, give them 2.5, what do they call it? CCs, when I tell you to, and put them back to sleep. So I stood there. It was what do you call the guys that do this?
Anesthesiologist.
Anesthesiologist, you know. I was operated like an anesthesiologist for him. And we take one after another. Some we saved, some we said it's too late, take them away.
How many were buried at sea the next day?
Well, altogether there was 40 bags, canvas bags, went over the side.
And some of them were your friends?
Yeah, about half of them are ours and half of them are the ship's company. Because the bomb went through and down into the ship's company. In both cases, it was where one upstairs where we were, our guys, they were in their bed playing cards or writing letters or going to bed. And down below was where they slept, the ship's company slept, and the bomb hit both of them, hit them both.
Anyway, the Blessman is taken under tow by the Newberry and is towed back to Saipan. Yeah. Arnie's still on the Gilmer, and he's got a mission. They take him back the next day off of Blue Beach, and tell him what you did again off of Blue Beach on February 19th.
Well, what did I do?
Well, you got into a boat and went offshore and directed the marine landing craft.
That's right. He told me when I went down that I was going to, this was after that awful evening. Now, he says, Lieutenant, Ensign Kvaalen, you lead the first wave into Blue Beach where you swam yesterday. So I got up at 0600, met him on the side and led the first wave into the Blue Beach, because I'd been there before. I knew where it was, I guess. And I looked back and hear this whole first wave coming in. I'd watch them hit the beach, and as you saw from that sand, you couldn't get up that, it was higher than, twice as high as this wall or 3. And they'd have an awful time. And when they did stand up, well, there was a rattle of mortars, and next thing, only about half of them would get up again because they were wounded or killed. So that's what I watched all day as I waved my blue flags for the next wave, wave after wave.
He was off of Blue Beach all day on February 19th. And since he was off Blue Beach and my uncle landed at Blue Beach, I'm convinced that whether he knew it or not, Arnie saw my uncle going to Blue Beach. Arnie went back to Fort Pierce several years ago. This is a mock-up of one of the underwater obstacles that they...
That's a Scully.
Yeah. Do you know how long ago that was?
Oh, that was a long time ago. In the 60s, no, the 70s, I think, sometime in the 70s.
This was... Are you familiar with Arnie's Pizza down here? Yeah.
The story on.
Yeah. What'd you find there?
My partner and I were swimming toward those big hulls, he was getting more and more frightened, and finally he just said, "Isn't it time we turn around and go back?" I said, "Well, no, but if you want to, you can stay here and I'll go in and see what's going on." So he stopped there, and I went on into Blue Beach, and that's when I saw I was catching fire, because I saw a lot of splashes in the water just ahead of me. I thought they were shooting at me. So then I dove down, because if you're in 4 feet of water, you in a foxhole fire can't penetrate 4 feet of water. So I dove, and then I saw a lot of things floating down to the shore in the bottom of the ocean. So I dove down, picked them up, and it was the 50 caliber hulls of a friendly airplane shooting up the beach, protecting me instead of shooting at me. So I picked up one of those hulls. I should have put it in my pocket. We didn't have any pockets, so and went back and picked up my friend who was all too glad to see me. But those 2 empty hulls were really, disconcerting, whether it had machine gunners in it or not.
Were there any? Did you find any machine gunners there?
No, they didn't shoot at me anyhow. This guy up above was, if anything, keeping him down. So it was friendly fire that
I'm surprised the Japanese didn't use it. They did use hulks like that at Tarawa.
Yeah.
Anyway, the three Marine divisions that landed at Iwo Jima as part of the 5th Amphibious Corps was the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions. On D-Day, the 5th Division landed on the left side of the beaches. The 4th Division landed on the right side of the beaches. And the 3rd Division was held in reserve, came in 4 days later. This is the extent of the penetration on the first day. On D+4, it was the 3rd Division got the orders to be inserted into the lines. By now, the flag had gone up. The 5th Division landed here and moved up the left side of the island, the west side of the island. The 4th Division pivoted and went up the right side of the island. The 3rd Division was inserted in the middle and moved up in between. Now here are the LCIs moving in. These gunboats and some contained rockets, would move into within 750 yards and provide covering fire. And there were 12 of these at Iwo Jima. All 12 of them were hit by artillery fire from the beach or from the caves on Iwo Jima. I think at least 3 of them sank, but all of them were hit.
Put totally out of commission, too. They were so badly hit. One of our officers was on one of them, and I never saw him afterwards till I called him up in Texas many years later because he really was gun shy. I don't know what you call it when you get so scared that with his ship is being hit and guys was dying all around him. We never saw him again until I called him up many years later in Texas.
Here, the LCIs would turn broadside to the beach and start firing. Like I said, 40 millimeter, 50 caliber. And these are the LCPs that the swimmers have just gotten. Probably, I don't know if they're going in or the LCPs have already dropped them off and they're going. They would go back out and get away.
Yeah.
And just loiter and then come back and pick the swimmers up after about an hour. And how was the water here at Iwo Jima?
Cold. Yeah.
No wetsuits back then.
Oh boy.
Now, this is the area where Arnie and his team swam to, and it was called, there were two Blue Beaches, Blue Beach 1 and 2. Annie's father, the last lieutenant, Jim Craig, landed right here at Blue Beach a little later in the afternoon. His regiment, the 24th Marines, was not part of the early morning invasion with the 4th Division. They came in late in the afternoon. We'll get to that in just a little bit. There was another area there called the East Boat Basin. This is where these hulks were beached.
Right.
This is a photo I took a few years ago, one of the best photos I've got of Iwo Jima, taken from the top of Mount Suribachi. The entire island is in this view, looking mostly north. And this is where Blue Beach is.
Yeah.
This is the northeast part of Iwo Jima. Again, where Blue Beach was. This is where your dad landed, Annie. This is, these are some cliffs. Of course, nobody would land there. They'd have to scale the cliffs. This is the very right-hand end of Blue Beach, right here. Here's an aerial view of that same scene. Here's all of this is Blue Beach. And here's the East Boat Basin. This was taken in July of '44, way, way before the invasion. Here's another scene of Blue Beach. It's a real nice photo I got of Iwo Jima a few years ago. A particularly nice day. Now, when the Marines got to the beach, they ran into this stuff. This is a little bottle of sand I got at Iwo. I got a couple gallons of Iwo Jima at home. And this is one of the things that the Marines wanted to know about. What was the sand like? Well, it wasn't sand. It was this volcanic gravel.
Yeah.
And Annie's father, my uncle, said, "There's no way you could dig a foxhole in it. You couldn't bury yourself in this stuff. As soon as you shovel out a handful of it, or a helmet full of it, it would just fill back up. And moving vehicles over this was very, very difficult. And the terrace, this is a photo I took. You can see a Marine right here to give you some idea of the scale. This is Blue Beach. And this terrace was very important because the Marines had to get up over this, and it was very difficult. And here's a scene, here's a scene looking the other direction toward Mount Suribachi of this terrace that they had to get up over. Now, here are the swimmers.
That is I. This guy rubbing the boot on the black-haired guy in front of him.
This guy?
That is I.
That's you. Oh, I learned.
He's putting grease on my back.
What a studly-looking guy.
Camouflaging me with blue grease.
The grease was also used to help protect from the cold.
Didn't help at all.
So what they're prepared to do is to go over the side to get in their LCPs. And here they are climbing down from the blessman to get into the LCPs. And here they are. Here's the boat that they're going to use to fall into and then into the drink and then get pulled back into. Now, here are their satchel charges. They throw these in to the water at the same time that the swimmer jumps in on the other side. So they have to swim over, pick them up, and then swim to the beach. That's one of these hulks.
They do a little look ominous, don't they?
Yeah, he wouldn't get me to swim to it.
Well, that's what my partner
No.
said. So he stopped right there.
That's what Arnie did in the morning prior to H hour. That afternoon, and this is 2 days before the invasion. This is February 17th, 2 days before the invasion. That afternoon, they went around to the other side of the island to reconnoiter Orange Beach, the northern end of the alternate landing beaches.
Yeah.
Arnie again was not, he'd already done his bit that morning. So he went in one of the boats, but he didn't get in the water. What did you do while you were there in that boat?
Well, I went up close enough so I could see the fire, where the fire was coming from. And I had a destroyer waiting back here for me to tell him what to shoot at. So I'd go in close enough and I'd see some firing coming from in here somewhere. And I'd call the fire from the destroyer. And I'd say up 100 yards or left 20 yards and right, get him on target and silence that source of fire from the Japanese. So that was my afternoon duty.
Arnie, your team had one casualty that day.
Yeah, he got.
Tell us about that.
Well, he was in the boat on the other side over there, and he got shot in the back of the neck by 50 caliber from shore. Yeah, he didn't last long.
He did survive. He wasn't killed instantly. He was taken aboard, I think, the Idaho,
Yeah.
and died that afternoon. He had a helmet on and a flak jacket of some kind or something around his chest, and the bullet went right in between. Why it didn't take his head off, I'm not sure, but he survived for a few hours. Sumter was his name, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, he was their only casualty that day.
The only casualty of us. We had some that.
Well, that's coming up.
Yeah.
Right now.